Journalist Karen Hao spent 8 years and conducted over 300 interviews investigating the artificial intelligence industry. Her extensive work produced 9 specific claims, concluding that these major AI companies operate as modern empires. To build functional AI policy, we have to filter these journalistic claims through an objective governance matrix. Governance that accepts compelling narratives uncritically will regulate the wrong things. Governance that dismisses them entirely will miss the actual structural risks. This matrix acts as a forensic ledger, testing these 9 claims against available evidence. It separates verifiable structural realities from overextended metaphors. Actionable AI infrastructure requires bedrock evidence, not rhetoric. The first verified claim on the ledger is knowledge production control. AI developers fund the scientists studying their own systems, creating the conditions for ecosystem capture. The primary evidence is documented. Google fired the co-leads of its ethical AI team, including Dr. Timnit Gebru, after they produced a research paper detailing the risks of large language models. Companies use corporate access as currency. They grant interviews and previews for favorable coverage and withdraw them for critical reporting. This filtration system dictates the information reaching voters and policymakers. The second verified claim is definition shifting. The way OpenAI defines artificial general intelligence changes entirely depending on who they are addressing. The OpenAI charter defines AGI as highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. Meanwhile, coverage of their Microsoft agreement points to a strictly financial threshold tied to $100 billion in revenue. When lobbying Congress, the framing shifts to solving climate change and curing cancer. For consumers, it is marketed as the ultimate digital assistant. A system that cures cancer operates in a different technical domain than a digital assistant and a different economic domain than a revenue threshold. Allowing a corporation to define its own governed object depending on the audience compromises any regulatory framework before it begins. The third verified claim is revenue-driven capability selection. Internal documents show that companies select which model capabilities to advance based on which markets will pay the most. Development focuses heavily on finance, law, and commerce. This contradicts the narrative of a neutral, scientific march toward general intelligence. The fourth verified claim examines data annotation labor conditions. The third-party annotation industry pits displaced workers against each other in a race for speed and cost. This structure atomizes the work and systematically drives working conditions downward, stripping individuals of agency regardless of their prior credentials. The fifth verified claim documents environmental externalities. Training and running these models requires a massive physical footprint and creates intense competition with local communities for resources. The physical infrastructure demands are immense. The Colossus facility in Memphis alone utilizes 35 gas turbines and requires millions of gallons of water for cooling. Acknowledging data errors is crucial. HAIA had to issue a correction for overstating a Chilean water consumption figure by a factor of 1,000. Correcting this specific error strengthens the broader structural critique by grounding it in verifiable reality. These 5 verified claims establish a clear pattern. The risks of artificial intelligence stem from structural incentive failures, not from the individual intentions of bad actors. We now shift the ledger to the stress testing phase. Here, we analyze the remaining 4 claims, where valid insights are overextended, into territory the evidence does not support. We begin with the empire analogy. This framework is useful for describing how tech companies extract resources and attempt to monopolize knowledge production. But the historical metaphor breaks down under scrutiny. AI developers lack the military enforcement that defined actual colonial empires, and they face intense market competition from each other and open-source alternatives. They also operate within strict legal jurisdictions. Frameworks like the European Union's AI Act impose actual constraints that force industry-wide compliance. Next is the intelligence scaling claim. HAIA correctly points out that achieving human-equivalent intelligence simply by scaling up neural networks remains an unproven neuroscientific hypothesis. However, the absence of a proven biological mechanism does not negate the reality of the resulting technological outcomes. As models scale, we observe highly measurable capability improvements in software coding, mathematical reasoning, and multi-step planning. We also see the emergence of novel risks.
Hallucination patterns and complex adversarial vulnerabilities increase directly alongside model scale. Governance must respond to these measurable capability gains and very real technical vulnerabilities, regardless of whether the philosophical mechanism of true intelligence is ever proven. The seventh claim targets self-driving predictions. Hao expresses skepticism about autonomous deployment. The raw safety data shows Waymo vehicles producing 92% fewer serious injury crashes than human benchmarks. This diagram illustrates a critical missing context, the operational design domain. Autonomous vehicles are restricted to highly favorable pre-mapped environments. Therefore, comparing national human driving data against an AI operating strictly within 5 structured U.S. cities is statistically invalid. A purely statistical engine cannot reliably generalize its safe behavior to an entirely unmapped, unstructured environment without undergoing massive retraining. The eighth claim contrasts bicycles versus rockets. This framework champions highly efficient, task-specific AI models over massive resource-heavy language models. Hao points to AlphaFold, a protein structure prediction system, as the ideal bicycle of AI. Yet AlphaFold undermines this exact argument. It was built by Google DeepMind and relies entirely on their massive corporate compute clusters and diffusion network architectures. Currently, high-value, application-specific AI cannot be decoupled from the exact corporate infrastructure that Hao critiques. Pulling these claims out of their strict operational context creates appealing narratives, but those narratives actively blind regulators to actual technical bottlenecks. This schematic illustrates the solutions phase. The 5 verified truths point to structural problems, and structural problems require engineered structural solutions, not simply swapping out personnel. We connect the documented knowledge monopoly directly to a mechanism called AI provider plurality. This architecture mitigates ecosystem capture by legally mandating API accessibility across all models, while forcing direct investment into small, independent AI platforms to guarantee market diversity. The reality of revenue-driven selection maps directly to the economic override pattern within the HAIA governance framework. This pattern observes that corporate incentives systematically prioritize advancing capabilities over verifying safety across all risk domains. You cannot fix a hard-coded market incentive by firing a CEO or restructuring an internal ethics board. The profit motive remains. Therefore, accountability structures must be mandatory and hard-coded into the deployment pipeline, operating completely independent of corporate leadership. Because these risks are structurally encoded into the free market, the solutions must be engineered into the national infrastructure. They cannot be requested as corporate favors. Finally, we address the risk of information convergence by deploying the multi-provider divergence protocol, known as HAIA-CAIPR. This mechanism operates by dispatching an identical prompt to multiple independent AI platforms simultaneously. Any material disagreements, errors, or hallucinations between the competing models are automatically flagged and immediately surfaced for human verification. This operational cross-check ensures that no single captured corporate ecosystem can serve as the sole source of truth for the public. Ultimately, effective AI governance is an engineering challenge, requiring technical precision and structural stability, not a clash of dramatic historical metaphors. Subjecting investigative evidence to rigorous, unsentimental scrutiny is the only way to build the hard infrastructure required to